How are you guys doing? Today is Monday, October 4th, 2021. I'm James Sims, and for this episode of The Elite, this will be the last end of the season statistical outline for all of the players that I performed to an incredible level at the 2021 season. This episode is going to be for the players that had a batting average of at least at least .300, with which, if you're familiar with baseball hitting numbers, anyone that can hit the ball like cleanly on 30% of their at-bats, that is an elite feat for the year, and they of course deserve to be recognized for what they've been able to do, for all their tough work, especially out of the players that qualified this season. And then of course I'm going to measure the players that finished with a plus 900 OPS. OPS is a combination of two different statistics. They measure on base percentage, which measures how many times a player makes it on base, which of course counts the amount of times you get a hit, of course combined with walks as well, because walks are added because it's still counted as a successful at bat in the MLB. And then it also counts that measured up against the slugging percentage that is measured when you take the amount of total bases that a player has divided by the amount of at-bats they have. Usually when you combine the numbers together, you can get a sense of whether a player, one, makes it to base often, and if they actually make it around the bases. It's a pretty solid combination of two different percentages to give you a sense of who the better, at least power hitters, and the better on-base percentage players are, to see who are just the most unstoppable hitters at the plate. So looking at it from this way, I'm going to first look at the batters that finished with a batting average above 300 or with at least 300. But first, starting with the honorable mentions, there were 18 players in the MLB that had a batting average of at least 295. There are 14 players in the MLB that finished the season with a 300 batting average. But looking at the players that make up the difference, 18th in the MLB was Xander Bogaerts, the all-star shortstop for the Boston Red Sox, who finished the season with a 295, batting for a Red Sox team that's still fighting for playoff. That's about to play their first playoff game tomorrow. Sitting 17th in the major leagues is Teoscar Hernandez, the right fielder for the Toronto Blue Jays, who finished third in the MLB with RBIs. He would do so for a Blue Jays team who finished just one win shy of qualifying for the playoffs this season. Sitting 16th in the league, it was a two-way tie between Brandon Crawford of the San Francisco Giants, who finished with the best record in baseball, and Bo Bichette, the all-star shortstop for the Toronto Blue Jays, who would finish with a 298 batting average after finishing with the second most runs in baseball, along with the second most hits in baseball, as Bo Bichette will go on to make a name for himself this season. Sitting right ahead of him, it is a two-way tie for the 13th best batting average in baseball. Well, I guess considering they measure it to like the 1,000th place, looking at where they are, I'm just going to measure them as virtually even in terms of batting average. You have Freddie Freeman, who finished with a 300 batting average in 159 games for an Atlanta Braves team that won the National League East. He would go on to finish with an 896 OPS, as he would put together a 180-hit season for a team that won their division. And sitting alongside him was Nicky Lopez, the shortstop for the Kansas City Royals. He had a 300 batting average in 151 games for a team that failed to qualify for the playoffs. Sitting ahead of this two-way tie in 12th place was Brian Reynolds, the center fielder for the Pittsburgh Pirates, would finish with a 302 batting average in 159 games. He would do so along a 912 OPS. He would be one of 6 players in the MLB that had at least a 300 batting average and at least a 900 OPS on the year. He did so for a Pittsburgh Pirates team that would fail to make the playoffs regardless. Sitting ahead of him in 11th place was Austin Riley, the third baseman for the Atlanta Braves. He finished with a 303 batting average alongside an 898 OPS in 160 games for an Atlanta Braves team that would win the NL East. He finished with 179 hits, 33 home runs, and at least 100 RBIs as Austin Riley became a young player that made a name for himself this season. Sitting ahead of him in 10th place in the National League is Adam Frazier, The second baseman, the all-star second baseman for the San Diego Padres, finished with a 305 batting average in 155 games for a team that did not make the playoffs. Alongside his 305 batting average, he finished with a 779 OPS on the year. Sitting ahead of him was Starling Marte. Starling Marte would start the season with the Marlins and finish with the Oakland Athletics. At the end of the year, he'd finish with a 308 batting average alongside an 837 OPS. He would play 120 games on the season and finish it with the A's, who just finished outside of the playoffs. Sitting ahead of Starling Marte is Nick Castellanos. Nick Castellanos, the right fielder for the Cincinnati Reds, would finish with a 309 batting average, which would be tied with Tim Anderson and Bryce Harper for the sixth best in the majors. But I guess we're looking at the actual percentage itself. He would finish with a 309 batting average alongside a 939 OPS. He is one of six players that finished with at least a 300 batting average and a 900 OPS, playing 138 games for a Cincinnati Reds team that just failed to make the playoffs. Sitting right ahead of him is Tim Anderson, the elite shortstop for the Chicago White Sox. He would finish with a 309 batting average on the season alongside an 806 OPS while playing 123 games for a Chicago White Sox team that won the American League Central. So, of course, he would have a good season for himself. And sitting ahead of him was Bryce Harper, the elite right fielder for the Philadelphia Phillies. He finished with a 309 batting average and the league high 1044 OPS in the MLB. He was one of two players with an OPS over 1 or over 1,000, depending on how you read that number, in the 141 games he played for a Philadelphia Phillies team that had been eliminated from playoff contention this season. Sitting ahead of Bryce Harper in fifth in the major leagues was Vladimir Guerrero, the elite first baseman for the Toronto Blue Jays. He finished with a 311 batting average in 161 games for a team that just missed the playoffs in the American League, actually. Vladimir Guerrero Jr. would go on to finish with the most runs in baseball. He finished in the top 5 in hits. He finished tied for the most home runs in baseball, and he finished in about the top 5 or the top 6 in RBIs this season, as he would be the other player that wasn't Bryce Harper that finished with a batting average over 1,000 with a 1,002 OPS. Sitting ahead of him with a 311 batting average was Michael Brantley, the left fielder for the Houston Astros. He finished with a 311 batting average in 121 games, helping the Astros finish with the best record in the American League West. Sitting ahead of Michael Brantley, who finished with a 799 OPS, was Juan Soto, the elite right fielder for the Washington Nationals. He finished with the third best batting average in baseball with 313, and he finished with the third best OPS in baseball as he finished with a 999. And of course, I'll mention it when we get to OPS, as he would go on to finish with a 313 batting average in 151 games for a Washington Nationals team that would go on to finish with the worst record in the National League East. But Juan Soto, of course, was not letting up in the at-bats that he had. Sitting right ahead of him with the second best batting average in baseball and the best batting average in the American League was Yuli Gurriel, the first baseman for the Houston Astros. He'd finished with a 319 batting average in 143 games for the American League West champs. He would finish with a 846 OPS. And last but not least, sitting at the top, the player that had the best batting average in baseball was Trey Turner. He finished with a 328 batting average on the season. He would also go on to lead the National League in hits. He would also be one of few players in the MLB that had at least 30 stolen bases on the season. And he was one of 6 players in the MLB to finish with a batting average over 300 and an OPS over 900. So, of course, he would go on to take the National League and the MLB batting title, as he would start the season with the Nationals and finish it with the Dodgers. Trey Turner did have one heck of a season at the plate. Now taking a look at the players that would finish with an OPS or an on-base plus slugging percentage of over 900, just to get a sense. of who was playing incredibly well. Looking at the players that made the honorable mention, Max Muncy finished 17th in the MLB with an 895 OPS. Freddie Freeman, the reigning National League MVP from Atlanta, would finish 16th with an 896. And Austin Riley, the third baseman for the Atlanta Braves, had an 898 OPS. That would be good enough for 15th in the league. But sitting ahead of him, there were 14 players in the MLB that had an on-base plus slugging percentage aggregate of over 900. Sitting in 14th was CJ Cron, the first baseman for the Colorado Rockies. Alongside a 281 batting average, he finished with a 375 on-base percentage and a 530 slugging percentage to combine for a 905 OPS for a Colorado Rockies team that failed to make the playoffs this year. Sitting ahead of him in 13th place was Trey Turner, the MLB batting title holder. He would finish with a 328 batting average on the season, alongside a 375 OPS and a 536 slugging percentage to add up for a total 911 OPS for a Los Angeles Dodgers team that is still competing for their playoff lives. Sitting ahead of Trey Turner in 12th place in the major leagues in on-base percentage plus slugging is Matt Olson. The first baseman for the Oakland A's would finish the season with a 271 batting average, holding a 371 on-base percentage and a 540 OPS, which would combine for a 911 OPS, which of course would make sense for his season, in which he put together 339 home runs and 111 RBIs for an Oakland Athletics team that would fail to make the playoffs. Sitting ahead of Matt Olson in 11th place is Tyler O'Neill, the left fielder for the St. Louis Cardinals. He would finish the season with a 286 batting average in 138 games for the St. Louis Cardinals. He finished with 34 home runs and 80 RBIs. He would finish with a 352 on-base percentage and a 560 slugging percentage, which would add for a combination in aggregate 912 OPS. And also sitting alongside him with a 912 OPS was Brian Reynolds, the center fielder for the Pittsburgh Pirates. Alongside his 912 OPS, he finished with a 302 batting average. He was one of 6 players in the MLB that had a batting average over 300 and OPS over 900. He would do so while finishing with 24 home runs and 90 RBIs, playing 159 games for the Pittsburgh Pirates, who finished the season with the worst record in the National League Central. Sitting ahead of Brian Reynolds with the 9th best OPS in baseball was Aaron Judge. Aaron Judge would finish the season with a 916 OPS along his 287 batting average. He would finish with a 373 on-base percentage and a 544 slugging percentage, while finishing with a 39 home run, 98 RBI season, playing 148 games for a New York Yankees team that was just barely able to make it into the playoffs off their last game and are going to compete in Fenway for their final game. But Aaron Judge would have an amazing season leading up to it. Sitting ahead of him in 8th place is Kyle Tucker, the right fielder for the Houston Astros. Alongside his 294 batting average, he would combine his 359 on-base percentage and his 557 slugging percentage into a 917 OPS in 140 games for a Houston Astros squad that has already clinched the best record in the American League West. Sitting ahead of Kyle Tucker is Joey Votto. The first baseman for the Cincinnati Reds would finish with a 938 OPS alongside his 266 ERA. He finished with a 375 on-base percentage and a 563 slugging percentage. So, of course, it would be among the top on the charts. And he would do so in 129 games for a Cincinnati Reds team that has just failed to make the playoffs. Sitting ahead of Joey Votto is Nick Castellanos, the right fielder for the Cincinnati Reds. He would finish with a 939 OPS alongside a 309 batting average. He was one of 6 with a 300 batting average and a 900 OPS. He would combine a 362 OBP with a 576 slugging percentage. And then he would, in 138 games for a Cincinnati Reds team that failed to make the playoffs, he would also, in 138 games, he finished with 34 home runs and 100 RBIs. Sitting ahead of Nick Castellanos, finishing 5th in the MLB in on-base plus slugging, was Shohei Ohtani, the all-star designated hitter for the Los Angeles Angels. In the 155 games he played for a team that missed the playoffs, in addition to his 257 batting average, he would combine a 372 OBP on base percentage with a 592 slugging percentage to get an aggregate 965 OPS. Sitting ahead of Shohei Ohtani, who would finish with the third most home runs in baseball with 46, was Fernando Tatis, the elite shortstop for the San Diego Padres, who was yet another player that had at least 40 home runs. He had 42. Fernando Tatis, alongside his 282 batting average, would combine a 364 on-base percentage with a National League high with a National League runner-up and an MLB runner-up 611 slugging percentage on the year. In the 130 games he played for the San Diego Padres, who finished with the third best record in the National League West. Sitting ahead of Fernando Tatis was Juan Soto, the elite right fielder for the Washington Nationals. In addition to finishing with the third best batting average in baseball with a 313, he finished with a 999 OPS as he combined a league high 465 OPP by a country mile with a 534 slugging percentage. He would do so in 151 games for a Washington Nationals team that would fail to make the playoffs this year. Sitting ahead of Juan Soto in second place with the runner-up for the OPS crown was Vladimir Guerrero Jr., the elite first baseman for the Toronto Blue Jays. He finished with a 1,002 OPS, one of two players that had an OPS over 1,000 or over 1, depending on how you look at the stat. He would do so alongside a 311 batting average, one of 6 players in the MLB to have a batting average over 300 and an OPS over 1,000. He would do so in 161 games while tying for the MLB high in home runs at 48 and 111 RBIs. And with this, he would do so for a Toronto Blue Jays team that would fail to make the playoffs this year. And sitting ahead of Vladimir Guerrero with the league high in OPS was Bryce Harper. The elite right fielder for the Philadelphia Phillies would finish with a 1044 OPS on the year, alongside his 309 batting average. Of course, he's one of the 6 with 300 and 900, and he's one of 2 players with a batting average over 300 and an OPS over 1,000 on the year. And he would do so while playing 141 games for a Philadelphia Phillies team that would fail to make the playoffs this year. Those are the 2 statistics that I really kind of want to look at in terms of the players that really kind of dominated their metrics. And with that said, that is the last of all of the end season stat leaders pieces that I have for this season. This 2021 season was a very special one, and without further ado, I am done speaking about the regular season, at least until the awards come out. But for now, in terms of the 2021 MLB, I am only going to refer to the playoffs moving forward. And without further ado, I can't wait to get started. Thanks for listening to all 17, 18 minutes of this piece. I hope all is well. And if you want to check out who was really kind of dominating within their own right, I definitely dropped the other episodes before this one. And today has really been a hectic day in terms of recording all this stuff. But I mean, that's what I got to do at the end of season. I hope all is well. And I want to thank everyone once again for listening to this piece. And I'll catch you all with another episode after this, or another episode tomorrow once all of today's episodes and matchups and performances are done. With that said, I want to thank everyone. I hope all is well, and I'll catch you with another episode tomorrow. Peace out.